In the depths of space where starlight bends and whispers carry the weight of civilizations, there existed a truth that few dared to speak. The galaxy had learned to fear the quiet ones, those who smiled with warmth but remembered every wound. And among all species that sailed between the suns, none were more dangerous when provoked than humanity. Ambassador Torin Vexel had never believed in fear. As a decorated officer of the Draknari Empire, he had witnessed the fall of star systems and the subjugation of countless worlds. His people were warriors, bred through 10,000 generations to conquer and dominate. Their scales could deflect energy weapons, their strength could crush steel, and their pride knew no bounds. When the Council of Unified Worlds assigned him to establish first contact with Earth, he considered it beneath his station. The humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely 2 centuries into their interstellar age. Their ships were functional but unremarkable, their technology adequate but not exceptional, their military spread thin across a handful of colony worlds. The intelligence reports painted them as fractured and emotional, prone to internal conflicts and sentimental attachments that weakened their strategic capabilities. To Torin, they seemed like children playing at civilization. But High Chancellor Myrax, the ancient leader of the Draknari Empire, had called him to a private audience before his departure. The old warrior, scarred from 100 campaigns, had done something Torin had never seen before. He had shown fear. "There is something you must understand about the humans," Myrax had said, his voice rough as grinding stone. "They are not what they appear to be. Beneath their peaceful exterior lies something we have not encountered before. A capacity for violence so absolute, so total, that it defies our comprehension of warfare." Torin had dismissed it as the paranoia of age. Now, standing in the reception hall of the human diplomatic station orbiting their moon, he wondered if he should have listened more carefully. The human delegation entered without ceremony. No warrior escorts, no displays of military might, no obvious weapons. Just 3 individuals in simple dark suits, moving with an ease that suggested either foolish confidence or supreme competence. The leader, a woman named Director Samantha Brooks, extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Her smile was warm, her eyes sharp and measuring. "Ambassador Vexel, welcome to Luna Station. We hope your journey was pleasant." Torin took her hand, noting the surprising strength in her grip. His intelligence briefings had mentioned that humans were physically weaker than most spacefaring species, yet her handshake suggested otherwise. Behind her stood 2 others, a young man introduced as Lieutenant David Park, whose military bearing was unmistakable despite his civilian clothes, and an older man named Professor Emmanuel Okonkwo, whose eyes held the weariness of someone who had seen too much. The negotiations began cordially enough. Trade agreements, technology exchanges, cultural programs, all the standard framework of interspecies diplomacy. The humans were gracious hosts, offering tours of their facilities and presenting gifts that showed thoughtfulness rather than extravagance. They spoke of cooperation and mutual benefit, of building bridges between their peoples. But Torin noticed things that troubled him. The military personnel he glimpsed moved with practiced efficiency that spoke of constant training. The station itself, though presented as a diplomatic outpost, had defensive capabilities that exceeded anything in the official schematics. And beneath the pleasant conversations, he sensed something else, a tension, a readiness, as if these humans were predators pretending to be prey. On the 3rd day, during a private dinner, Torin decided to test them. He brought up the Calthan incident, a border skirmish 2 years prior where a human colony ship had been fired upon by Calthan raiders. The attack had killed 300 human civilians. He mentioned it casually, watching their reactions. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Director Brooks set down her fork with careful precision, her smile never wavering, but something changed in her eyes. Something cold and ancient. "The Calthan situation was resolved," she said quietly. Torin pressed forward, emboldened by her restraint. "Yes, though the resolution was rather extreme. The entire Calthan raider fleet destroyed, their bases eliminated, their leadership executed. Some in the galaxy felt the human response was disproportionate. Professor Okonkwo leaned forward, his voice gentle but carrying an edge like a blade wrapped in silk. Ambassador, let me tell you about a human concept called proportionality. When someone kills 300 of our children, our mothers, our fathers, proportional response is not measured in ships destroyed or bases eliminated. Proportional response is measured in ensuring it never happens again. Ever. To anyone. Lieutenant Park, who had been silent throughout the meal, spoke for the first time. The Calthan raiders had been operating for 60 years before they touched our people. They had attacked 17 different species, killed tens of thousands. Everyone knew where their bases were. Everyone knew who led them. And everyone did nothing because it was easier to pay tribute than to fight back. And what did you do? Torin asked, genuinely curious now. We reminded the galaxy why predators fear humans, Brooks said simply. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest or the most technologically advanced. But we have something that evolution carved into our bones over millions of years of climbing from prey to apex predator on a death world called Earth. We have memory, and we have rage. She stood, moving to the window that looked out over Earth's blue curve. That beautiful planet down there tried to kill us every single day for 3 million years. Ice ages, plagues, predators with teeth like swords and claws like daggers. Volcanoes that blotted out the sun, droughts that turned continents to dust. And we survived. Not by being the strongest, but by being the most stubborn, the most relentless, the most absolutely unwilling to accept extinction. When we finally climbed down from the trees and walked upright, we were weak and slow and had no natural weapons. Every other predator should have eaten us. But we learned to track, to coordinate, to hunt in packs. We learned to run our prey to exhaustion over days of pursuit. We learned to remember every path, every water source, every danger. And most importantly, we learned that when something tried to kill us, we did not just fight back. We eliminated the threat completely. Torin felt his scales ripple with unease. This was not the speech of a peaceful species. This was something else entirely. Do you know what persistence hunting is, Ambassador? Professor Okonkwo asked. It is a technique human ancestors used. We would wound an animal, then follow it. Not quickly, not in a sudden chase, but slowly, methodically, for hours or days if necessary. The prey would run, thinking it had escaped. But we would keep coming. Always tracking, always following, never stopping. The prey would exhaust itself, and then we would simply walk up to it and finish what we started. That is what we did to the Calthan raiders. They thought they could strike us and flee back to their holes. But we followed them. We tracked every ship, traced every communication, identified every base, every leader, every supporter. And then, when we had the complete picture, we acted. Not in rage, not in haste, but with the calm precision of a species that spent 3 million years learning how to hunt. Director Brooks turned back to face him. You came here wondering if we are weak, Ambassador. Wondering if the rumors about humanity are exaggerated. So let me make something perfectly clear. We do not want war. We prefer peace, cooperation, mutual prosperity. But if you or anyone else in this galaxy mistakes our preference for peace as inability to wage war, you will learn the same lesson the Calthan learned. What lesson? Torin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That humans do not fight wars to win battles. We fight wars to ensure we never have to fight them again. And we will pursue that goal with a patience and thoroughness that will terrify you. The room fell silent. Outside the window, Earth turned slowly, that beautiful blue and green world that had forged the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. And for the first time in his long career, Ambassador Torin Vexel understood what High Chancellor Myrax had tried to warn him about. The humans were not weak. They were simply waiting. 3 months had passed since Torin's initial meeting with the human delegation. The negotiations had continued, cordial on the surface but laden with unspoken tensions. Trade routes were established, cultural exchanges arranged, and a framework for military cooperation drafted. Yet Torin could not shake the feeling that he was dancing on the edge of a blade, one wrong step away from witnessing something terrible. The Draknari Empire had accepted the treaty terms, though many of his superiors remained skeptical. Commander Zarthos, a hardline military leader who had built his reputation on conquest, was particularly vocal in his contempt for human capabilities. During a secure transmission, he had laughed openly at Torin's warnings. "You have gone soft, Vexel. These humans have infected you with their fear. They are technologically inferior, numerically insignificant, and politically divided. If they were truly dangerous, they would have expanded aggressively instead of hiding behind diplomatic niceties." Torin had tried to explain what he had sensed in that dinner meeting, the cold calculation behind Director Brooks' words, the absolute certainty in her voice. But Zarthos dismissed it all as psychological warfare, tricks meant to compensate for genuine weakness. Then came the incident at Threshold Station. Threshold was a massive trading hub in neutral space, administered by the Council of Unified Worlds. Dozens of species maintained facilities there, conducting commerce under the protection of the Council's peacekeeping forces. It was considered the safest location in the galaxy, a place where old enemies could meet without fear of violence. Torin was there for a routine economic summit when the Vrenki arrived. The Vrenki Dominion was an aggressive empire known for their brutal efficiency and casual disregard for other species. They had been pushing the boundaries of acceptable behavior for years, testing the Council's willingness to enforce its own rules. Captain Gorvin, the Vrenki representative, brought with him a squad of armored soldiers and an attitude that dripped with arrogance. During the opening reception, he made his intentions clear by publicly humiliating the Tenthari delegation, a peaceful aquatic species whose colony worlds bordered Vrenki space. "Your people will evacuate the Danera sector within 30 days, Gorvin announced, his voice booming across the reception hall. "We have claimed those systems, and we will take them whether you resist or not. Consider this your only warning." The Tenthari ambassador, a gentle being named Whisper, tried to protest. "The Council has established that sector as protected space. Our colonies have existed there for centuries. You cannot simply take what is not yours." Gorvin laughed, a harsh sound that made several delegates flinch. "The Council has no military to enforce its rules. We take what we want, and the weak accept their place. This is the natural order." Torin watched as other delegations shifted uncomfortably. He recognized the pattern. This was how empires expanded, through aggressive posturing and the calculated use of force against those too weak to resist. The Council would issue strongly worded condemnations, perhaps impose economic sanctions that the Vrenki would ignore, and eventually the Tenthari would be forced to abandon their homes. Then he noticed the human delegation. Lieutenant Park stood near the back of the hall, his expression carefully neutral, but his hand had moved to his communication device. Director Brooks was across the room, engaged in conversation with the Tenthari ambassador, speaking in urgent, quiet tones. Within an hour, the dynamic had shifted. The Tenthari delegation requested an emergency session, which was their right under Council rules. When the assembly convened, Ambassador Whisper stood before the gathered representatives and made an unexpected announcement. "The Tenthari people formally request military assistance from humanity under the mutual defense provision of the Terra Accord. We invoke this protection in response to direct threats against our sovereign territory." The chamber erupted in chaos. The Terra Accord was a little-known treaty that humanity had quietly negotiated with several smaller species over the past year. Most major powers had dismissed it as irrelevant, a symbolic gesture that gave humans the appearance of building alliances without any real substance. Captain Gorvin rose from his seat, his massive frame dominating the room. "The Terra Accord is not recognized by the Vrenki Dominion. We do not acknowledge human authority in this matter. Your toy alliance means nothing." Director Brooks stood, and somehow her small human frame commanded attention in a way that Gorvin's size could not. She spoke calmly, each word precisely measured. "Captain Gorvin, the Terra Accord does not require your acknowledgement. It is a binding mutual defense treaty registered with the Council. By threatening the Tenthari, you have triggered its provisions. I am authorized to inform you that humanity now considers the Vrenki Dominion to be in a state of hostile action against our treaty partners." Gorvin sneered. "And what will you do about it, human? Send your little ships to wave flags at us? The Vrenki Dominion has a battle fleet of 8,000 warships. How many ships can you muster? A few hundred? Perhaps 1,000 if you strip every colony of protection?" 3,417, Lieutenant Park said quietly from the back of the room. "That is how many combat-capable vessels we currently have deployed and ready for immediate action. But numbers are not what should concern you, Captain." Gorvin turned to face him, amusement evident on his features. "Oh? And what should concern me?" "The fact that you just threatened our allies in front of witnesses," Park replied. "That makes this simple. Clean. No ambiguity about who started what." "You are bluffing," Gorvin said, though Torin detected uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Humanity would not risk war over a handful of aquatic primitives." Director Brooks activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed the Danara sector, the disputed territory where Tenthari colonies existed. Overlaid on the map were tactical projections, fleet movements, supply lines, and defensive positions. "We have been monitoring your fleet concentrations for 3 weeks, Captain. You have assembled a strike force of 200 warships in the Kelton system, positioned for a rapid assault on Tenthari colonies. You plan to move in 48 hours, overwhelming their minimal defenses before the Council could respond." The display shifted, showing new data. As of 6 hours ago, humanity deployed the Third Fleet to positions throughout the Danara sector. "We have placed defensive platforms around every Tenthari colony, established patrol routes that intersect all likely Vrenki approach vectors, and positioned rapid response groups capable of engaging any hostile force within minutes." "This is an act of aggression," Gorvin protested, but his bluster was fading. "No," Brooks corrected. "This is an act of defense. You announced your intention to seize territory by force. We have positioned ourselves to prevent that. If you withdraw your fleet and renounce your claims, this ends peacefully. If you proceed with your planned attack, you will be engaging human military forces in defense of our treaty allies." The chamber had gone silent. Every delegate understood what they were witnessing. Humanity had just called the bluff of one of the galaxy's major military powers. Torin felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen the projections, studied human military capabilities. On paper, they should not be able to challenge the Vrenki Dominion. Their ships were good but not superior, their weapons effective but not overwhelming. By all conventional analysis, this was a fight they could not win. But then he remembered Director Brooks' words from that dinner months ago. "We do not fight wars to win battles. We fight wars to ensure we never have to fight them again." Captain Gorvin made his decision. The Vrenki Dominion does not back down from threats. If humanity wishes to protect these weaklings, then humanity will share their fate. Our fleet will proceed as planned. Brooks nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. "Then I must inform you that as of this moment, humanity considers itself at war with the Vrenki Dominion. Under the laws of armed conflict, we are required to give you one final warning." She looked directly at Gorvin, and Torin saw in her eyes the same cold certainty he had witnessed before. "We do not want this war, Captain. But if you force it upon us, we will prosecute it with every resource at our disposal. We will not stop at defending the Tenthari. We will not accept a negotiated peace that leaves your military capacity intact. We will pursue total victory through whatever means necessary. This is not a threat. This is a promise." "You are insane," Gorvin said. You would doom your entire species for aliens you barely know? No, Professor Okonkwo said, standing beside Brooks. We would honor our commitments regardless of the cost. That is what makes us different from you. You see alliances as temporary conveniences. We see them as sacred bonds. The Tenthari asked for our protection, and we gave our word. That word is absolute. The Vrenki delegation stormed out of the chamber, Gorvin shouting threats and promises of human extinction. The other delegates sat in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. A species barely 2 centuries into space travel had just declared war on an empire that had dominated its region of space for millennia. Torin found Director Brooks as the session ended. This is madness. The Vrenki will bring their full fleet to bear. You cannot possibly win. Brooks smiled, that same warm expression she had worn during their first meeting, but now Torin understood what lay beneath it. Ambassador, do you know how many wars humanity fought on Earth before we reached the stars? Thousands. Tens of thousands. We perfected every form of combat from Stone Age tribes to nuclear standoffs. We learned strategy from conflicts spanning continents and centuries. And every single lesson, every tactic, every hard-won insight, we carried with us to the stars. She gestured to the holographic display still showing the Danera sector. The Vrenki think this is about ship counts and firepower. They are wrong. This is about will, about determination, about the absolute refusal to abandon those who trust us. They will learn what the Kalthan learned, what every species who has challenged humanity has learned. What is that? Torin asked. That we are patient, we are thorough, and we never, ever stop. The Vrenki fleet will come. And we will show them why humanity earned its place among the stars not through strength, but through the absolute unwillingness to accept defeat. As Torin returned to his quarters that night, he composed a message to High Chancellor Myrax. He chose his words carefully, knowing that what he reported would shape his empire's future relationship with humanity. You were right to fear them. Not because they are strong, but because they are relentless. They have made a choice that may destroy them, and they made it without hesitation. Whatever happens in the coming days, the galaxy will never underestimate humanity again. He sent the message and looked out at the stars, wondering which of them would witness the first battle of a war that would reshape the known galaxy. The war began quietly, as many great conflicts do. No dramatic opening salvos, no grand declarations broadcast across the galaxy. Just the steady movement of fleets through the darkness, the calculated positioning of forces, the tightening of a noose that the Vrenki did not yet realize encircled them. Torin had requested permission to remain at Threshold Station, officially to monitor the situation for the Draknari Empire. In truth, he needed to understand. Needed to witness what would happen when humanity's promises met the brutal reality of galactic warfare. High Chancellor Myrax approved his request, perhaps sharing the same morbid curiosity. The Vrenki struck first, as everyone knew they would. Their pride would not allow retreat, and their military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force applied rapidly. Commander Zarthos, watching from the safety of Draknari space, sent Torin frequent messages celebrating the impending human defeat. The Vrenki assembled an armada of 1,500 warships, a force capable of sterilizing worlds, and sent it toward the Danera sector. The human Third Fleet numbered only 400 ships. The mathematics seemed inescapable. Then the first battle reports arrived, and nothing made sense. The Vrenki fleet had jumped into the Danera sector expecting to sweep aside human defenses in a matter of hours. Instead, they found themselves in a carefully constructed trap. The humans had seeded the region with thousands of automated defensive platforms, each one a cluster of missiles and point defense systems that activated the moment Vrenki ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Before the Vrenki could properly organize, they had lost 80 ships to weapons they could not immediately locate or target. When they pressed forward, they encountered the human fleet not massed for a conventional battle, but dispersed in small rapid response groups that struck from unexpected angles, inflicted damage, and withdrew before the Vrenki could bring their superior numbers to bear. It was warfare without honor, without the grand fleet engagements that defined galactic conflict. It was efficient, brutal, and utterly demoralizing. Within 3 days, the Vrenki had lost over 300 ships without achieving a single strategic objective. The Tenthari colonies remained untouched, protected by defenses that seemed to regenerate as quickly as they were destroyed. Captain Gorvin sent increasingly desperate messages to his homeworld, demanding reinforcements and attempting to explain how a numerically inferior force was systematically dismantling his armada. Torin watched the tactical displays in Threshold's observation center, standing beside other diplomatic observers who had come to witness humanity's defeat. Instead, they saw something that challenged every assumption about warfare. "They are not fighting to win," one of the observers whispered, a military analyst from the Pelthran Republic. "They are fighting to teach a lesson." Director Brooks entered the observation center, her presence immediately noticed despite her attempt at discretion. Torin moved to intercept her, needing answers. "Your casualties must be mounting. You cannot sustain this strategy indefinitely." Brooks studied the displays, her expression unreadable. "We have lost 73 ships, 1,900 personnel killed, another 800 wounded. Every single loss is documented, every name remembered, every family notified personally. We do not treat our people as numbers, Ambassador." "Then why continue?" Torin demanded. "You have proven your point. The galaxy sees that humanity can fight. Negotiate a peace now, before this escalates further. Because the lesson is not complete." Brooks turned to face him, and Torin saw the weight she carried, the burden of every decision that led to this moment. The Vrenki attacked because they believed might makes right, that the strong can take whatever they want from the weak. If we negotiate now, if we accept any outcome that leaves their military power intact, we teach the wrong lesson. We tell the galaxy that aggression works if you are strong enough, that treaties and alliances mean nothing when faced with overwhelming force. So you would sacrifice your people for a principle? We would honor our commitments regardless of cost. That is not the same thing. Brooks gestured to the tactical display showing the Danara sector. Every person in that fleet volunteered, Ambassador. They knew the odds when they deployed. They went anyway because they believe that some things matter more than survival. Trust matters. Honor matters. The promise we made to the Tenthari matters. Torin felt his worldview shifting, the comfortable certainties of power dynamics and military superiority crumbling. In all his centuries of diplomatic service, he had never encountered a species willing to accept such costs for allies who offered them nothing in return. The Tenthari had no resources humanity needed, no strategic value, no military power to contribute. They were simply beings who had asked for help. "What happens when you win?" he asked quietly. "Because you are winning, somehow. What comes after?" Brooks was silent for a long moment, watching the lights on the tactical display that represented ships and lives and the future of civilizations. "When we win, we will not occupy Vrenki worlds. We will not demand reparations or territory. We will not humiliate them beyond what they have done to themselves. But we will ensure they cannot threaten the Tenthari or any of our other allies ever again." How? By making the cost of aggression so high that they never risk it again. By demonstrating that humanity keeps its promises with a thoroughness that terrifies anyone considering whether to test us. By showing the galaxy that there are species who value principles more than profit, honor more than expediency. She turned to leave, then paused. "Ambassador, you asked me once what humanity would become. I will tell you now. We will become the species that others trust because we have proven trustworthy. We will become the shield for those who cannot defend themselves. Not because it benefits us, but because it is right. And anyone who mistakes that moral clarity for weakness will learn the same lesson the Vrenki are learning now." Over the following weeks, Torin watched as the impossible became reality. The Vrenki Dominion, an empire that had dominated its region for centuries, was systematically dismantled by a species a fraction of its size. Not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through strategy, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept anything less than complete victory. Human losses mounted. The Third Fleet was reinforced by the Seventh and elements of the Fifth. Every ship that fell was mourned, every casualty recorded with a precision that spoke to how deeply humanity valued each individual life. Yet they continued, pressing forward with a patience that wore down Vrenki resistance like water eroding stone. Commander Zarthos stopped sending gloating messages. Instead, his communications became questions, requests for Tauren's analysis of human tactics, worried speculation about what this meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. The Draknari Empire had built its reputation on military might, on the certainty that strength determined outcomes. Watching humanity win through sheer determination shook that foundation. The end came not with a grand battle but with a simple transmission. The Vrenki Council of Commanders, the ruling body of their empire, sent an unconditional surrender. They agreed to withdraw from all disputed territories, to pay reparations to the Tenthari for damages and displacement, and to submit to monitoring by council peacekeepers to ensure compliance. Captain Gorvin, the officer who had sparked the war with his arrogance, was tried by his own people for bringing disaster upon them. The Vrenki, facing the systematic destruction of their military capability, chose accountability over defiance. When Director Brooks announced the peace terms to the assembled diplomatic community at Threshold Station, Tauren noticed something that struck him deeply. She did not celebrate. There was no triumph in her voice, no gloating about victory. Instead, she spoke of the lives lost, the cost paid, the hope that this conflict would prevent future ones. Later, in a private conversation, Tauren asked her the question that had haunted him throughout the war. Was it worth it? All those deaths, all that destruction, for species you barely knew? Brooks looked at him with eyes that had seen too much, aged by responsibility and sacrifice. Ask the Tenthari if it was worth it. Ask the dozens of smaller species who have contacted us since the war ended, seeking to join the Terra Accord because they finally believe that someone will stand beside them against predators. Ask the next species that might have been targeted by the Vrenki or others like them, who now live free because we proved that aggression has consequences. But your people, the ones who died, what would they say? They would say they did what they believed was right. That they kept humanity's word when it would have been easier to break it. That they stood for something larger than themselves. She paused, and Tauren saw grief behind her composure. We do not celebrate war, Ambassador. We do not glory in violence. Every life lost diminishes us. But we will not be paralyzed by fear of loss. We will not abandon our principles because upholding them is difficult. Tauren returned to the Draknari Empire changed. He had witnessed something that defied his people's entire understanding of power and weakness. In his final report to High Chancellor Myrax, he wrote words that would shape his civilization's future. Humanity is not dangerous because they are strong. They are dangerous because they mean what they say, because they will accept any sacrifice to honor their commitments, because they fight not for conquest but for principle. Any species that values only strength will eventually encounter humanity and learn this lesson. The question is whether we learn it through observation or through the same painful education the Vrenki received. The galaxy had changed. In conference rooms and military academies, strategists studied the war not for its tactics but for what it revealed about the nature of power. Strength without principle was revealed as hollow. Numbers without determination proved insufficient. Aggression without consequence had ended. And humanity, the species that had climbed from prey to predator on a death world called Earth, had shown the stars that some things mattered more than survival. Honor mattered. Trust mattered. The bonds between beings who chose to stand together mattered. They had not won because they were the strongest. They had won because they refused to lose. And that made all the difference.